if progressivism is ever going to take the play away from the kind of resentful, angry, reactionary politics that breeds Trumpism, it's going to have to do something for ordinary people again. And the American dream has been lost. My generation, if you didn't have rich parents, had a very good shot at the American dream. College was basically free. You could afford to buy a home. You could get a job that was not a gig, that had a good career. You could have a pension. You could have affordable health, and the health system was not impenetrable. And you look at the world from the point of view of somebody who's 25 years old, who doesn't have rich parents, or the point of view of somebody who's 40 years old, who is in a declining area of the country, or a declining sector of the economy. The prospects of realizing that dream are getting further and further away. And unless we restore it, which I think Biden is really trying to do, you're going to have more and more angry reaction.
They're really doing amazing work at Community Action. And so when I found out that this was a bill that's in the Education Committee, Community Service Block Grant Program, that came about to address poverty issues, I thought, what a wonderful way to help the community and to support the community action agencies in Oregon and across the country. And then when I found out how long it had been since it had been reauthorized, I went, gosh, things have changed a bit in the last several decades. So when GT and I started talking about it, we realized, okay, it's time to update this statute. It's doing really important work in our communities.
Thank you for the invitation to be able to be with you today. I always say I'm honored when I'm invited to come out to such an esteemed group to speak to, and I'm surprised when I get invited back. So you both honor and surprised me today, invited me back. And bottom line is I believe in the mission. Community Service Block Grant, the programs underneath that. Number one, let's start with the people, because that's what's most important. You all, what you do in your communities, the professionals administer, and quite frankly, your boards. Your boards are made up of community leaders, of people that come from diverse backgrounds and places, but they come together, with a commitment to address the situation of people that are living in poverty. And that, to me, that is such a righteous mission. The work that you do is righteous. When I look at Scripture, there is parts of Scripture that says the poor will always be among us. And I think that's true. Bad luck or bad decisions, whatever it might be, there will always be someone who's finding themselves in a situation where they're struggling financially. We just don't want them to stay there long, right? And that's the goal.
What I didn't mention is she was chair of Defense Appropriations. She's now ranking on Defense Appropriations and likely to be chair of Defense Appropriations again next year. And yet you find time to help us, to help this program, this little program in the scheme of things. You find time to help us. Why?
Well, so it's pretty simple. You make a difference in communities. You make a difference in the quality of life for families you directly touch, but families you don't directly touch. My constituents sent me here to not do the easy stuff, to do the hard stuff. And so I'm just going to keep on. And working with David and you and all that, that's the ray of sunshine.
Not to be too dystopic here, because there are reasons to be hopeful. But what worries me is that the most reasonable, the smartest, the ones who really do want not to go to the left or to the right, but forward, they're leaving. They've had it. They're angry. They're sad. There's nobody to talk to. I was on the phone with a member yesterday who's leaving, who said, literally, there's nobody that I can talk to anymore. This is a Democrat. Said, literally, there's nobody that I can talk to anymore to get stuff done. So I just feel that I will be much more productive out of Congress than I am in Congress. That's a big problem when the smart, moderate, decent members are leaving and leaving behind these, this performative politics by people who've gone to Congress not to lead, but to get literally followed on social media. Yeah. It's a big problem.
I
always found great purpose in the job that I did, and I didn't retire after almost 30 years because I didn't find any more purpose. But like Sherry said, time for a new generation to step in. But Sherry and I had the kind of districts that can change. It could be Republican, it could be Democrat. Few members of Congress have districts like ours. Most of them are very Republican or very Democratic, which tends, then you go to the extremes and you get to be those loud voices that you see yammering on TV and just saying wild things. But I remember there was one time when I was the ranking member, meaning the top Republican on foreign affairs, and Tom Lantos, a Democrat from the Bay Area, San Francisco, was the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. He was born in Hungary. He is a survivor of the Holocaust, the only Holocaust survivor to have ever served in Congress. And as he's about to gavel the committee in, we looked at each other and he said, "Is this a great country or what?" And what he meant is, he's a naturalized American, not born here. I'm a naturalized American, not born here. And here we are, the top dogs of the Foreign Affairs Committee, setting foreign policy for the United States of America, the greatest country on earth. And in no country, I think, would you be able to have that position when you are born in that country.
We have looked at what we need to prepare for if President Trump is elected again to the presidency. We've looked at what we need to prepare for if House flips or Senate flips, whatever the outcome on both sides. I think we're ready. We look at what regulations maybe we can push the agencies to do, but things we need to make sure that are in place so that whatever the political winds are doing, are whichever direction they're blowing, we're prepared for them. And I think we will be. I'm very, very, very confident where we're going on this. I think what we owe those that were in community action before us here on our 60th anniversary is the recognition that it takes a lot of work to keep this program alive. And there's a lot of people who gave their time and their talents and their careers that allow us to meet today and this week and this year to celebrate 60 years of community action. We recognize that. You know, war and poverty is controversial. You're going to hear about that in the debate coming up. But it's also unique and it's also special and it also speaks to the I think the goodness that America aspires to. So we should use the 60th anniversary to think big and bold, to think about what's next in this fight, where we go from here, and how every single one of us can make a difference in moving and propelling this program forward.
One quiet story that illustrates this is that imagine one of the greatest literary giants of our time, James Baldwin, had thought to seek refuge in Paris, France, because he thought America was irredeemable in its racism. While he's sitting at one of his favorite cafes, minutes away from the Champs-Élysées, having espresso, he sees a whole stand of newspapers. And in the front page of every newspaper is Dorothy Counts and her family walking their walk. And he's so inspired, he decides to re-engage in the civil rights movement, comes back to the United States, seeks to meet with Dorothy Counts' family, meets with Dr. King, and the rest is literary history.
I have a little bit of military experience, and what America needs to win, the only war we should have been involved with in the first place, the war on poverty. And I think in that sense, you are making tremendous strides.
I remember when I started in 1973. And I thought, well, I'm going to go and I'm going to give it a try. And I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to stay, but I stayed 44 years.
I came into this as a youngster. My first engagement with community action, I was 16. I just become the first Black elected high school class president in my county. And the NAACP was concerned about my future, and so they sent me to a leadership development class that was run by the Community Action Agency.
After grad school, I became a volunteer for the Kalamazoo County Community Action Program. They had a very flamboyant leader named Ed Morris. And so we had 2 busloads of people who came down to Washington, D.C. To protest the Nixon administration's plan to embargo funds that Congress had appropriated for community action.
Ed Bex, who was then the chairman of the board, a director from California, came to a board meeting after the 1980 election and said Ronald Reagan, as governor, proposed to close community action, and he's going to do the same thing nationally. And I know Bob Cord, David Bradley, and others conceived and installed the Community Services Block Grant, which again was a way of our network surviving and growing over time.
Nate, to remind you what the question was.
Something about the breakdown of the family, was that the question?
No, I think we've covered that topic enough. The question is, what were the successes? Mistakes were made. I readily admit that I was a Shriver devotee, but mistakes were made. A lot of mistakes were made. I concede that. But what were, in your mind, you've looked at this, what were the successes?
Yeah, I've mentioned some of them. I also think it's important to realize, in terms of the funding, in terms of the actual fiscal consequences, Medicaid and Medicare are the biggest legacy of the Johnson Great Society program. So if we think healthcare for lower income people and for senior citizens is valuable, then those are successful programs. I think they can be improved dramatically, especially if both parties, start thinking technocratically about how to make these programs work better for people and work efficiently. But they have benefited millions of people. Just to, I'll mention it again, but SNAP really benefits families. I think the impact on marriage and employment is dramatically overblown in many circles. People who look really closely at that, yes, when you start to require people to work and prove that they're working or searching for work with burdensome paperwork every 6 months, a lot less people start using the program. And you can celebrate that, but a lot of it is just imposing hassle on people and making these programs less convenient, less accessible. SNAP and Head Start and Medicaid, to the extent that these benefits do flow to kids, they have changed lives. They have helped millions of kids grow up to be more productive. And, and when people grow up to have more education and more income, they thrive in all these other really important ways that Robert and Nick and a lot of other really well-meaning conservatives focus on. It's great to have 2-parent families. It's great to be part of a community and to earn a good paycheck and not have to worry about applying for government assistance. And that all comes with good health care and skill development opportunities for kids. And the war on poverty contributed to that. And I think that's something that should be more widely recognized.
I want to go back to the first point I made, which is, unlike every effort at expanding the social safety net prior to Johnson, the Great Society tackled racial inequality far more than any program prior to that. And so again, tying community action programs and delivering it directly to low-income individuals meant you could bypass, Governor McKeithen in Louisiana, who didn't want to get, he wanted a segregationist local community action agency. Sarge said no. By finally requiring states that were going to get elementary and secondary education money to actually desegregate their schools 10 years after Brown versus Board and the Southern Manifesto, that led to school desegregation. By forcing hospitals to desegregate and actually take care of low-income Black Americans in order to get Medicare and Medicaid funds, that meant that individuals who had been locked out of the welfare state prior to that were able to have access to things that as Ira Katz Nelson, the political scientist, wrote a book. It was called When Affirmative Action Was White, which was every social welfare program prior to the 1960s was affirmative action for whites. That's the way the programs were designed. And Johnson, whether it was because he believed in it or because he thought it was politically expedient to do so, that's another topic for a different debate, but that's an incredible consequence.
Well, that was because I took what we learned in Sunday school about loving your neighbor as yourself and treating people the way you want to be treated. I took that seriously, and this shack of a colored school, colored was the polite term then, Black was fighting words, some of you may remember that. I knew out the other side of town was the fanciest building for miles around, a brand new brick school for the white kids, and I just sort of knew this was wrong.
How important was the spiritual element to the civil rights fight?
It was primary for the Southerners. Sitting at that lunch counter, sometimes we were teasing Professor Salter that you didn't really cover all that information that you had on the final exam, sir. But sometimes we were holding hands and praying. When the Freedom Rides were stopped with the church bombings, with the bus bombing and the problems at the church in Montgomery, I got a phone call in the middle of the night because people who were trapped in the church could only make one call per family unit, and it was timed like 2 minutes. I got this call in the middle of the night. Joan, this is Paul. I can't talk. We're trapped in the church. Send more riders. So I got 5 of us together, and we flew from Washington, D.C. to New Orleans, and it only cost $52 and change. Imagine that. And then we took the train and got the Illinois Central and got off in Jackson and got arrested. So I claim credit for getting Stokely into the Deep South and causing lots of good and maybe some bad trouble.
Your experience in Mississippi, the heart of darkness, going down there, were you afraid?
No, I don't deal with fear. Fear paralyzes your brain and keeps you from thinking what you need to do to stay as safe as possible in the situation. Fear will get you killed.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown. Accept that it's soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, then you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone. For the times, they are changing. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, keep your eyes wide open, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin. There's no telling who it's naming. For the Zulus and now win, later to win. For the times, they are changing. Come senators, congressmen, please heal the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block out the hall. For he that gets hurt will soon have stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll shake your windows, rattle your walls. For the times, they are changing. become mothers and fathers throughout the land. Don't criticize what you don't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out the new one if you can. Lend a hand, for the times they are changing. The line it is drawn, the curse it is cast. The slow one now will later be fast. As the present now will later be past. The order is rapidly faded. The first one now will later be last. For the times they are changing.